and the considerations of the one ultimate heat death of the universe, need not have such profoundly depressing moral consequences as they seem to have at first glance. However, even this limited consideration of the future is foreign to the emotional euphoria of the average man, and particularly to that of the average American. The best we can hope for the role of progress in a universe running downhill as a whole is that the vision of our attempts to progress in the face of overwhelming necessity may have the purging terror of Greek tragedy. Yet we live in an age not over-receptive to tragedy. The education of the average American child of the upper middle class is such as to guard him solicitously against the awareness of death and doom. He is brought up in an atmosphere of Santa Claus, and when he learns that Santa Claus is a myth, he cries bitterly. Indeed, he never fully accepts the removal of this deity from his pantheon, and spends much of his later life in the search for some emotional substitute. The fact of individual death, the imminence of calamity, are forced upon him by the experiences of his later years. Nevertheless, he tries to relegate these unfortunate realities to the role of accidents, and to build up a heaven on earth in which unpleasantness has no place.
But we shouldn't treat each
other
that way.
This heaven on earth consists for him in an eternal progress, and a continual ascent to bigger and better things. Our worship of progress may be discussed from 2 points of view, a factual one and an ethical one, that is, one which furnishes standards for approval and disapproval. Factually, it asserts that the earlier advance of geographical discovery, whose inception corresponds to the beginning of modern times, is to be continued into an indefinite period of invention, of the discovery of new techniques for controlling the human environment. This, the believers in progress say, will go on and on without any visible termination in a future not too remote for human contemplation. Those who uphold the idea of progress as an ethical principle regard this unlimited and quasi-spontaneous process of change as a good thing, and as the basis on which they guarantee to future generations a heaven on earth. It is possible to believe in progress as a fact without believing in progress as an ethical principle, but in the catechism of many Americans, the one goes with the other. Most of us are too close to the idea of progress to take cognizance either of the fact that this belief belongs only to a small part of recorded history, or of the other fact, that it represents a sharp break with our own religious professions and traditions. Neither for the Catholic, the Protestant, nor for the Jew, is the world a good place in which an enduring happiness is to be expected. The Church offers its pay for virtue, not in any coin which passes current among the kings of the earth, but as a promissory note on heaven.
It's better if we put wisdom
the
first,
Calvinist accepts this too,
with
the additional dark note that the elect of God who shall pass the dire final examination of Judgment Day are few, and are to be selected by his arbitrary decree. To secure this,
and to be
no
able to
virtues
learn for
on
yourself,
earth, no moral righteousness,
which we do,
may be expected to be of the slightest avail. Many a good man will be damned. The blessedness which the Calvinists do not expect to find for themselves even in heaven,
give people
they certainly do not await on earth.
Give people
the
a go.
Hebrew prophets are far from cheerful in their evaluation of the future of mankind, or even of their chosen Israel, and the great morality play of Jah, while it grants him a victory of the Spirit, and while the Lord deigns to return to him his flocks and his servants and his wives, nevertheless gives no assurance that such a relatively happy outcome will take place except through the arbitrariness of God. The communist, like the believer in progress, looks for his heaven on earth, rather than as a personal reward to be drawn on in a post-earthly individual existence.
They need more support.
Nevertheless, he believes that this heaven on earth will not come of itself without a struggle.
Not just management.
He is just as skeptical of the big rock candy mountains of the future as of the pie in the sky when you die.
They need education.
Nor is Islam, whose very name means resignation to the will of God, any more receptive to the ideal of progress. Of Buddhism, with its hope for nirvana and a release from the external wheel of circumstance, I need say nothing. It is inexorably opposed to the idea of progress, and this is equally true for all the kindred religions of India. Besides the comfortable passive belief in progress, which many Americans shared at the end of the 19th century, there is another one which seems to have a more masculine, vigorous connotation. To the average American, progress means the winning of the West. It means the economic anarchy of the frontier, and the vigorous prose of Owen Wister and Theodore Roosevelt. Historically, the frontier is, of course, a perfectly genuine phenomenon. For many years, the development of the United States took place against the background of the empty land that always lay further to the west. Nevertheless,
Governments
many
need
of
to
those who
remember
have
they were
waxed
given their
poetic
job
concerning
not
this
by the
frontier
people,
have been
but
praisers
by
of the
God.
past.
God ordained the government.
Already in 1890, the
Governments
census
there to
takes
serve,
cognizance of the end of
to
the
do
true
good and
frontier
put down the
conditions.
evil.
The geographical limits of the great backlog of unconsumed and
Not to be
unbespoken
tyrannical
resources
like
of the country had clearly been set. It is difficult for the average person to achieve an historical
National
perspective in
Socialist
which
Party
progress
and
shall have been reduced
Nazi
to its
Germany
proper
or
dimensions. The musket with which most of the Civil War was fought
The
was
communism that
only a slight improvement
took
over
a lot
that
of people
carried at
out.
Waterloo, and that
It's
in
not
turn
the
was
way to-
nearly interchangeable with the Brown Bess of Marlborough's army in the
to
Low
manage.
Countries. Nevertheless,
And
hand
government.
firearms had existed since the 15th century or earlier, and cannon more than 100 years earlier still. It is doubtful whether the smoothbore musket
Let-
ever
you know,
much exceeded in
let
range
God
the
take
best
care
of
of
the
the planet.
longbows,
Yes,
and it is certain that it
we've done
never
enough
equaled them in
to
accuracy
solve
nor
climate
in
change.
speed
We've
of
done
fire.
enough.
Yet the longbow is the almost unimproved
It was good
invention
for
of the
what it
Stone
is, but no
Age.
more.
Again,
Don't knock
while
off
the art of
people
shipbuilding
and
had by no means
reduce
been completely stagnant,
their ability
the
to
wooden
look
man
after
of war,
themselves
just before it
with
left
rules
the
and
seas,
regulations that
was of a
stop them
pattern which had
producing,
been fairly unchanged in
stop
its
them
essentials
farming.
since the early 17th century, and which even then displayed an ancestry going back many centuries more. One of Columbus' sailors would have been a valuable able seaman aboard Farragut's ships. Even a sailor from
Part
the
of the
ship
reason
that took
things are
St.
going
Paul
wrong
to
is
Malta
because
would
people
have
are
been
immoral
quite reasonably
and
at
sinful.
home as a forecastle hand on
That's
one
a
of
natural
Joseph
law.
Conrad's barks.
That play
A
there.
Roman cattleman from the Dacian frontier would have made quite a competent
You
vaquero
can see
to
what it
drive
is from the
longhorn
Bible, you
steers
can
from
see
the
what it
plains
is
of
from
Texas to the terminus of
the
the
study of the
railroad,
subject with
although
natural
he would
law.
have been struck with astonishment with what he found when he got there. A Babylonian administrator of a temple estate would have needed no training either in bookkeeping or in the handling of
And
slaves
the
to
use
run
of
an
the
early
legal
southern
system, the
plantation.
justice system.
In short,
Well,
the period during which the main conditions of life for the vast majority
it's
of
gone
men
too
have
far.
been subject to repeated and revolutionary changes had not even begun
competitive.
until the Renaissance and the Great Voyages, and did not assume anything like the accelerated pace which we now take for granted
All
until
people
well
need is
into
the
the
keys
19th century.
to knowledge and to learning
Under these
again.
circumstances, there is no use in looking anywhere in earlier history for parallels to the successful
And to shape
inventions of
New
the
Zealand
steam engine,
in
the
a better way.
steamboat, the locomotive,
Billy T.
the
Cahill,
modern smelting of metals,
he's
the
got some
telegraph,
good
the
principles.
transoceanic cable, the introduction of electric power, dynamite, and the modern high-explosive missile, the
Benny
airplane,
Eastwood,
the
alright, he
electric
slanders
valve,
a
and
little
the
bit,
atomic
but he's
bomb.
just trying to make his
The
point.
inventions in metallurgy which heralded the origin of the Bronze Age are neither
Truth
so
is probably
concentrated in
shouldn't
time nor
slander.
so manifold as to offer a good counter-example. It is
I don't
very
think
well
that's
for
a
the
good use of
classical
free speech.
economist
I
to
don't think
assure
it's
us
helping.
suavely that these changes are purely changes in degree, and that changes in degree do not vitiate
In
historic
Christians, you
parallels.
don't slander the
The
devil.
difference between a medicinal
He's
dose
already
of
judged.
strychnine and a fatal one is also only one of degree. Now, scientific history
But
and
resist 'em.
scientific sociology are based on the notion that the various special cases
Do God's
treated
will.
have a sufficient similarity for the social mechanisms of one period to be relevant to those of another. However, it is certainly true that the whole scale of phenomena has
Young
changed
people, you need to know
sufficiently
that your
since the
culture's
beginning
been
of modern
corrupted.
history to preclude any easy transfer to the present time
It's
of
not your
political,
fault.
racial, and economic notions derived from earlier stages. What is almost as obvious is that the modern period beginning with the Age of Discovery is itself highly heterogeneous. In the Age of Discovery,
Although I will
Europe
say
had
we're all
become aware for
personally
the first time of the
responsible for
existence of great
what we
thinly
say and
settled
do.
areas capable of taking up a population exceeding
Whether
that
it
of
be good or
Europe
bad.
itself, a land full of unexplored
And I
resources,
prefer it always
not
be good
only
if
of
we can
gold
do
and
that.
silver but of the other commodities of commerce as well. These resources seemed inexhaustible, and indeed on the scale on which